Always come prepared. So I have down here on my handy cards to do introductions, but Ray, you've already been up here. You've already been up here. You've already been up here. Ivan, that leaves it to you to start us off.
Hello everyone, my name is Ivan. I'm the CEO of the company Smarty Ads. We've been doing white label solutions with blockchain on top of that for 2 years right now, using all types of blockchains, not really attached to the one we have. So good to have everyone here today. Thank you.
Great. And we have Michael Rodov, Sam Goldberg, and then Ray Lumpkin. Sorry. Let's just launch right in. So first off, Ray, it's for you. I'm going to ask you to lean back on some of your previous experience living in agency land. Why don't you talk it over for a lot of people in the group who haven't actually experienced the pain that is reconciling campaigns after they finish. Could you go over like the process, how it goes wrong, how people lose faith in themselves and everybody else, and the pain?
Yeah, the anarchy of the first 2 weeks of every month in the agency. And I will say, actually, it has become kind of one of those like, wow, now we know why the delayed payment. It's like, let's just keep this going, where the agencies don't have to pay as long as the fraud is there or the problems are there. Not really. That was meant to be a joke.
No.
No, that's a whole nother problem. That's a whole nother issue for another day. I would say, it's a nightmare between accounting and the media buyers. So it's like, and I was just thinking about this session earlier, and it's like how we used to use like tear sheets, for magazines. You'd have a proof, or like newspaper, you'd have a proof that something ran. Now, you have no proof. So it's like you take and you trust whatever comes in the bill. Well, I won't even say you trust it, but you get the bill, and then you take it back to the team to compare, do the numbers match? And it's like, if it's off by a penny, it means, okay, go back in, find out where the discrepancy is, because no invoice can be cleared if there's even a penny of discrepancy between the two parties. So they're...
Can I just ask you a question there, because you use a piece of like jargon that I don't think a lot of people are going to know. What is a tear sheet?
Oh, God. A tear sheet being a proof that an ad ran.
So it's a receipt.
So it's actually a receipt. It's like it could be in a magazine case. It's a literal magazine. Now you get, like, the magazines are provided in the office, and you've got proof that, there, your ad's in Glamour or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. So you prove it actually was printed.
You prove and you had proof.
Exactly. So if you have this proof, though, as you said, like historically, even printed media, like you would collect proof and you get like a binder and you prove that happened, right?
Right. Right.
So my question here is like, that's gone away though. Like we don't actually, we've gone from running everything in digital. Like we don't have any paper in Group M's office. If you've ever been in there, it's all digital now. But what's gone away is we don't actually have these unified binders that are presented to us by the other end of the business, right?
Absolutely.
So we can't turn around and show the customers.
The client, right.
Exactly. So it turns into the publishers keeping track of their numbers.
Right.
We're keeping track of ad server numbers. Third party in the middle has their own set of numbers. And then at the end of every month, it's show me what you got.
Exactly.
Okay.
Show me yours and I'll show you mine. Yeah.
Oh boy. We're there already. But the worst thing though is that the numbers match most of the time. Never.
No.
No.
They typically don't.
And how is the setup? Is it basically, do you go back and forth? Generally,
there's a negotiation back and forth. And I just remember even in the case of fraud where we would get a credit invoice back the next month. Like, we think about this much of your purchase was fraudulent. Like, how do you know that? Like, show me the proof. And there was obviously no showing of any proof of anything. It's just take our word for it. This is what happened.
And if it goes well, you resolve it after a month or 3 months, right?
Right.
And if it goes bad, you feed the lawyers?
It depends on who the vendor is. They depending on who they are, they win, typically.
Okay. So this is not a good thing. This is really painful. And so it was earlier said in the last, on the last panel, which I also believe you were on, that this is probably one of the early places where blockchain might be able to help out.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to jump across the panel now. Ivan?
Yeah.
Can you basically just, at the highest level, can you explain like how using databases, like a database where access is shared, can help resolve this?
Yeah, sure. I think that the reconciliation is a big problem, of course, and that's exactly what I can see from the opposite side of the SSP. And the bigger question here is who's right, because it's not only about the fraud, it's about the script running at the page, actually across multiple devices and across multiple platforms, right? So before even touching the blockchain, I would be a little bit skeptical as always, and I will tell that we can solve it as an industry. We just need the same rules. Many of these rules have been written here at the IAB, I guess, for the good. And the problem is that from what I see from the technical standpoint, not many rules are being followed, right? We all have the OpenRTB protocol, but slightly different versions of this protocol. We are at the edge of OpenRTB 3.0 with AdCert and everything, but still, what's the acceptance of the ads.txt and apps.txt across the industry, right? And it's all about the consensus, and we can have potentially one bigger encrypted database that will be hosted somewhere where we all trust, where we will all look back into and probably just instead feeding the lawyers will feed this database with or without the blockchain. But the question here is like, how can we agree at even the level of the impression that it actually happened, not even touching the complicated part of fraud. And that consensus level should be put into the blockchain afterwards. And I guess my opinion here is that we should all come up with a consensus of how we want to count and what we want to count. And afterwards, to make the perfect world reconciliation work, we would need to have some kind of a financial body who would really pay everyone, no matter what, and then we go to the lawyers if something goes wrong.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And then Michael, I'm going to ask you kind of from two levels here. Since you actually ran a publisher before starting AdNode, if you can add any flavor from the pub side, and then also just what your thoughts are about basically unifying receipt tracking in a single system. So if you want to ask.
Right. So I ran a publisher that we for about 5.5 years that we sold at the end of 2017. And I can say that the reconciliation issue was pretty much a nightmare. We had a head of sales, 3 reps, and 3 ops planner folks. So basically 1 rep per person dealing with pretty much their reconciliation and pulling some numbers to put in PowerPoints. We also had an operations person that went through the numbers, and as a CEO, I still every month kind of want to sit in and found questions. What people did is they put together Excels, Google Sheets, pull documents from everywhere. There are all these like Dropboxes, and some campaigns took many months to figure out what was going on. Kind of similar to Lou Ray's experience, I don't have any recollection of a single campaign where the numbers matched. So as you might imagine, for any business, booking revenue is hard. And just knowing what your bookings are, you would just see that change every week. It was always kind of a different number. So it is a very interesting experience. But I think what I learned was that as I met with a lot of agencies and our customers, everybody had the same problems. So there are multiple stakeholders with every order, and be like 5 different companies, and everybody has spending 2 to 3 days for every order, putting numbers together, figure out what's going on. And then throughout this whole process, I don't even think there was verification around are people in the same geography? Are you refreshing the ads or not? So a lot of things that should be checked aren't. A lot of things that are checked aren't even checked in a consistent way. So that created a lot of issues. Now, in terms of standardization, which was a second question, that's a great question. So I think the challenge is that we'll never kind of completely agree on a unified way at any point in time. But what we can agree on for any campaign is who do we trust for that one particular campaign at that point in time to be kind of the official referee of what's going on. And maybe that's a firm that the agency likes, maybe that's a firm that the publisher likes, but the point is you have one official record keeper for what's happening. And if at any point the agency and publisher disagree on that, they can choose a new official record keeper. In fact, if you really want, you can have 2 official record keepers and say, we'll only pay if both of them agree for that particular ad impression. So there are different ways to skin a cat, but I think the point is to provide the industry with the tools to come up on an order-by-order basis how are we going to referee these orders? Because ultimately, 5 different companies putting together the numbers and the tracking for every order is super inefficient. It creates all sorts of opportunity costs, and it's extremely expensive.
So you're kind of like talking like almost making like a multi-headed receipt where everybody gets their own copies from the agreed upon operator.
Everybody gets the same receipt really fast. And if you, by the way, if you get your receipt 3 months later and there's a problem, that's kind of an issue because there's a lot of wasted dollars and wasted inventory. But if you're getting every second the receipt, and at any second you're like, I disagree with that, you just pause your campaign. Maybe there's a disagreement over like 1 ad impression or 100 ad impressions or whatever it is. But the point is that you have receipts all the time during the campaign.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Michael. Sam, right before we get to you, I just want to make a quick statement. It's very funny looking out on the crowd when we're talking about this because there are several people like smiling, like nodding their heads, and you know like they've been through this. So I can see you guys. And like one of my first things ever in the AdTech universe was resolving a discrepancy. It took me 2 months. I couldn't believe it. I totally did it pretty fast, which I couldn't believe. So that was my introduction to the industry. So thank you, Michael, again. Sam. So if the unified wave tracking is preferable, why use a distributed ledger or a blockchain to do that? Like, what's the advantage over like just getting like a big centralized database in one place and we all just use that database? What do I want to use this blockchain thing?
Yeah, so the blockchain thing's, as it turns out, pretty critical. I think there's a couple elements here, though. I think there's the technical perspective, and then there's the human perspective also. And so from a certain point of view, what we're doing, and what I believe we're doing collectively, is that we're inviting those in our industry that are providing value with the ability to prove that they're providing that value. And that's pretty powerful. If you consider that we operate in an industry that is extremely high frequency as far as the number of events that occur we're talking in seconds and milliseconds, but if you think about just one day, right? No other industry in the world operates at this level of volume. Even if you counted every single pill in the pharmaceutical industry, all of them, still not even close to digital advertising. So there's that element. And then, yes, it's very high frequency, but then we also have incredible trust issues between our parties, and this is built up over time where most of us don't trust each other and have good reasons for that because, again, we can't prove or disprove things frequently. So, the blockchain. This gives us the ability to have a neutral third party receive the receipts. And again, these are often multiple parties. So a receipt can be really nice if it's a one-to-one exchange, but when you have multiple parties, it becomes far more challenging. So the blockchain allows us to have a shared ledger that's a neutral third party, and also the ability to make sure that the data is not manipulated on the back end. In other words, like, okay, great, I'm receiving all these receipts, everything's going great, but we don't want to have a situation where any data can ever be manipulated, and that's where the immutability of the blockchain is so important in our industry. So I think those are 2 very important technical reasons. And then on the human element, the business-to-business element, it's having a place that we can go and know that no one's manipulating it, no one is getting favoritism, we know what the rules are, and we know that the rules are being enforced.
Excellent, thank you, that's a great explanation. Okay, so these are going to be kind of jump ball questions, so I'm going to ask a question, and if whoever wants to take it can kind of smile, raise their hand.
Should we get off our chairs?
Yeah, you're right. All right.
Where's the buzzer?
Yeah, where's the buzzer? Okay, so following up on what Sam just said, if some of the data that I'm actually going to use the blockchain for tracking is about a specific campaign, and only certain parties involved in that campaign should actually have access to that data. Like, this is just a generic question. How do I know that only those involved in the campaign that should have access on a blockchain should have access to that? So does anybody want to basically discuss that?
I'll jump in. I'll just say because of the technology we're using, we use R3 Corda, which is it's not a distributed public ledger, and this could apply to other blockchains as well, because I'm sure they're permission-based. but only the parties, you determine what level of detail does each party have access to. And obviously the person that owns and is paying the money for the campaigns. I mean, they're typically the one that drive the fact that we're going to do something different because they don't trust what's happening down the supply chain.
Because permissioning.
Exactly.
100%. I mean, I think collectively, if anybody, I'm curious, has anybody ever met an enterprise like a company that wants their data involuntarily shared? I mean, I don't think there is one. I've never met any. I'm just curious if anyone has. But then privacy is, of course, of critical importance, and it can be easily done with permissioning. So you nailed it. You know, I don't think we have to go a whole lot further than that, but it looks like Michael wants to, so.
Michael wants it, Michael gets.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of the best way to make sure that your data isn't seen by the wrong party is not putting your data in a place where that party can see it. So I think that the right way to use blockchains when that is concerned is just simply to post verification hashes. For anybody who doesn't know, a verification hash is a 64 letter or number combination, like the number of possible variations at 2 to the 64th. That's just more like it's bigger than the universe. It's some crazy large number. So the idea is that you can never take that verification hash and turn it back into your order document. But if you are one of the 2 companies or 3 companies that's involved in that order, you can take your order document and use any third-party tool to automatically regenerate the verification hash. So that's the essence of how blockchain works.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So the next question is on the concept of Oracle. So how do companies that are basically being used currently to verify things like viewability, fraud, brand safety, leverage basically these blockchain environments we've just been talking about to kind of like to supplement their current business models? I mean, does anybody here want to take that?
I'll take
Excellent.
that. We are running some experiments in Smart AS when we are taking the DSPs and SSPs we've built in-house, and actually the majority of them don't use the same systems for the verification and reconciliation. So in that case, we have to come up with a single place where we write everything, where people then can just look back and agree instantly on what happened. And you can't measure like one-to-one. You can't put one-to-one like Pixelate to IES or to WhiteOps or to whoever. So what you can do is to write everything into the distributed or non-distributed ledger. Doesn't matter actually at this point, but I think that it's a currency question. By currency, I mean that it's really whom the crowd decides to trust. There is no one who's better or worse. I think that there are just companies who are solving that at a time, and definitely if you keep track and keep eyes from all sides on what's going on, not just in someone's dashboard, but in many places, and can just compare it somehow into the anonymous way, that's where the blockchain can be really valuable and can really help.
I think that's excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
No, I really like that response. I also think that it gives an opportunity to our allies, the viewability vendors, the anti-fraud vendors who have great technologies. It gives them also ability to have what's effectively a free auditing service, so that their clients, those that are paying them, have the proof in pocket that they're getting the value that they paid for. And I think that's a great benefit to those guys.
All right, this is a kind of interesting question here. This one is can using distributed ledgers or blockchain to track and authenticate identities be helpful in the reconciliation process, and how? So like if we're actually working on identities, like so how do I know if I'm using a blockchain that entity that signed off there is that entity?
I'll take on that one. I think that this question takes us back to the KYC problem, which is major right now across the blockchain itself. But if we go to the cryptocurrencies, which I prefer not to do, but let's talk about the Bitcoin itself as like, the god of this industry of cryptocurrency. There are ways when you can get the KYC through an exchange, actually through the entry point. What I'm trying to say is that if we determine that we can trust the entry points, then the KYC goes on the shoulders of this entry point, whoever it is. It doesn't matter, maybe it's a private chain or just a verification vendor. That's my opinion.
So this might be a kind of an argument for the need for like something like a consortium ledger where something like the IAB or IAB and a consortium of other agencies are certifying that these players on the blockchain are who they say they are.
IAB could be an entry point, but I think the question here is who's the ledger? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was saying that it takes us back to the question like IAB can make the KYC to all the players, but I think the question is who owns the ledger itself and how distributed is that?
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. It's an interesting problem. All right. Excuse me. Last one. Oh, this is a fun one. Okay, so back around to the last panel. This one has to do with using cryptocurrency in the reconciliation process. So I kept this to last because this could get very interesting very quickly. But does it make sense to use cryptocurrency? Is cryptocurrency better to use in reconciling? Is it less useful to use? Or what are your thoughts? Let's kind of leave it wide open. So.
I'm just going to say cryptography is what's really important within the blockchain, being able to cryptographically marry up. This was the advertiser, this is what the ad size was, this is where it was supposed to appear, this is what actually happened on the back end. And you marry that up with the actual placement level data, and then you find, okay, didn't appear on the site, was hidden, was not viewable, was not even on a valid site, or was on the right site, was on the right the right impression size, was the right creative. So the cryptography is what I think is really important in the whole blockchain conversation, but that's my opinion.
Okay. I think that's, the use of cryptography is critical to any distributed ledger tech. But one thing I'm more interested in is like this question kind of cutting towards the use of actual cryptocurrency and tokens. So, and how you're going to resettle up. Is it easier to slide tokens back and forth, or just numbers in a ledger and pay that out in fiat?
Well, imagine a world where we already agree on to the extent what happened, right? So we can see where the discrepancies were, and we agree like these are where the payment should go, right? So let's just get there. I think that's to the core of your question.
Yeah.
So we agree who should get paid what. Well, we can imagine a scenario where we've gotten so comfortable with this process that effectively instantaneous payments make sense. And that is where cryptocurrency or tokens could come into play. I seriously doubt that if any CFOs are in the audience, I seriously doubt that any finance departments would be big fans of this. Very, very unlikely today. One, introducing another currency. Two, introducing expedited payments when that might not be the most beneficial for the respective parties. So I personally think we're a ways away from any crypto being used in reconciliation or payments in general. Although certainly we can imagine a scenario, especially from the publisher perspective, where you getting paid last, where it could be of huge benefit.
Yeah, I'll just say I agree. I think that you need to separate the reconciliation and efficiency benefits of having a ledger from the actual payment. So, there are a lot of agencies that have had their margins squeezed, so the float is a part of their model. And, I don't think there are a lot of people who are that invested in reversing all that. So I think that when you ask people to pay in some coin or do something more quickly and they're comfortable, that creates a lot of problems. I would say that when you have these shared ledgers, there are a lot of things that publishers can do on their end. So, for example, you have a factoring right now, a big factoring business for publishers. And the way that works is they hire a lender. The lender calls the publisher, says, hey, is that invoice correct? And then they call the agency and say, is that invoice correct? So if you lend somebody $5,000 at a 10% rate, for 3 or 4 months, you're paying, $75 at a $150 contract just for them to make phone calls. So I think that over time, it'll reduce the cost of like financing to publishers and things like that. But when you take out all the negatives of externalities of having no visibility behind the float, keep the float, but have the reconciliation piece, I think that's where the value is.
think that with the cryptocurrency, it's still too early, because the question here is all about the regulation and about who wants to get paid into the cryptocurrency, because that's where it boils down to, right? So still, I want to believe, and for now, I would say that if someone would make this factoring efficient and instant, so we don't have higher commissions, that would be the best, probably real-life appliance to that, even if they're using some kind of a token, which is stable token. Just make it work. That's what I would say.
Cool. I just want to wrap that around back to Lou, right? You kind of instinctively got away from crypto as fast as possible. Is that because you think we're still in crypto hangover from like the crash of Bitcoin and all that?
Well, I just think I just go back to the comment I made on the other panel. There's so much confusion around crypto within, blockchain itself. I mean, cryptocurrency and Bitcoin just happened to be the first application of it. But I will say I had a conversation with another large entity that serves up ads, and saying like that, just the reality of instantaneous payments. I mean, and just from being agency side, where the margins are squeezed so much, the last thing you need is to rock that whole ecosystem. I mean, we fuel a lot of the world's GDP, so it's it would have a big ripple effect.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that's like why you did that, because that's all you did. I'm like, I know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, but the advantages of crypto aren't necessarily what we're talking about with instantaneous payments. I mean, not everyone's walking around with briefcases of cash is running between the brands and agencies and vendors. I mean, we're making digital payments as it is. It's just, are they cryptocurrency payments or fiat payments? And right now, I don't think anyone's raising their hand being like, hey, there's huge advantages of crypto right now in our space. And until that happens, there's just not the motivation.
Yeah, that's great. Shaylee, I'm done with my questions. So do you want to go to the audience, or do you want to move us on? Somebody has to have a question. Richard, you owe me a question. He's hiding. Okay. In the back. You ask the hard ones.
That's a great question. So I would say that a lot of folks who are agencies think of themselves as fiduciaries of media investment dollars. And during that process, when you think of yourself as a fiduciary, you want to make sure typically that there's some sort of check, and these days it's a human check each step of the way when you're allocating dollars. Otherwise, you're not acting properly as a fiduciary. So what that does is it actually prevents you from creating rules and algorithms around the automated buying and actually the creation of invoices and reconciliation, as well as buying, which I think of that as an iterative process around that whole buying process. And it involves a lot of people wasting a lot of time in a very frustrated way. So the idea, and then also it's very expensive. So we spoke about each firm now needs to maintain its own database of the records, and each user needs to load up 5 different tags measuring basically the same thing, and then everybody needs to kind of review whether their numbers match up. So what you do to replace that human check is you have a mathematical proof verifying each step of the way that the numbers from your official, in our case it's official record keepers. I know in some cases the firms are providing the data, but you have this one hash that verifies the data that came into play for that campaign. So think of, first you have settlements, which can be at any time period. Typically for our ad node, we have hourly settlements, you have daily settlements, and of course you have your end of month calendar settlements as well. So if you have concerns about anything in that time period, what you can do is obviously just click download the document, drag it into a SHA-256 converter, and you can check that it's right. But the fact that you can check at any point in time means that you'll always be calculating that correctly, and that means that people can actually either run algorithms or set up email notifications for their ad planning team or agency buying desks to quickly make changes in the campaigns rather than waiting on end. So you actually have much less computational work with blockchain because you have one verification for one file as opposed to human verification for 5 different files that everybody needs to review back and forth.
Yeah, so Michael, how long did it take you to do that reconciliation? 2 months? 2 months. And that was fast?
That was training me up, and it was ugly, and I ended up in a bargaining.
Were they paying you during those 2 months?
Yes, they were.
So it's costing them a lot of money. I'm sure there's a lot more guys than Michael working on this issue. So if we can resolve that technologically and efficiently, there we go.
This was a puppy off the end of the dock thing where it's like, here, you gotta learn what we're doing. Clunk.
Well, we obviously think so. I mean, and I think it comes back to the value. I mean, we touched on this earlier, like having a neutral third party being able to handle this, and it's probably being a shared ledger. And then also the inability to manipulate the data. I mean, in our industry, that's a huge, huge advance.
So one other thing that's kind of interesting, and this sort of gets back to the whole fundamental of using a blockchain, is that all the nodes are by definition synced. So unlike when you're emailing around and you have things in different states, you know when you go to the blockchain, you go to your node and you check out that receipt, that series of receipts, you're looking at the same set of receipts that everybody else who has access to their node is looking at the same time. And that's a big advantage rather than trying this, all right, I got it last night, oh, I got to repull it, oh, now you have to repull it. So that kind of gets you away from that little game of trying to get onto the same page. You go to the node, it's there.
Yeah,
sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to add to everything Mike was saying. It's kind of like, why would you use the web instead of print? It's like, why in the world would you want to email that?
I mean, yeah, that is also this is all still theoretical, right? Like, I mean, you're here at the IAB blockchain working group to kind of test this stuff out. So we still have to figure out how all this is going to work. Like, this is all theory. We probably can't keep those huge files on a blockchain because of obvious reasons, or at least they're current. There might be something new coming out over the horizon out of some computer science lab where it does work on that. But what we do want to do is, like, we're using the functionality that we have today and trying to test it in different scenarios. So, but yeah, I mean, you might have to keep you might just have your hashed receipt over here, and you may have to keep, that data over, like, in Amazon Glacier or whatever for, like, the next, like, 3 years or something, whatever the contract says, to go back and test it. You'll probably never have to do it, but that might be what's required via your contract terms or whatever. But yeah, I get your point, but we're trying to, we're also just trying to, like, this is the functionality we get from the ledger, and that's not the functionality that ledger does very well. So, but thank you, it's a really good point. Yeah, are you? Yeah, I mean, join the workshops. I mean, like, we're working on this stuff. This is the exact stuff we're trying to push. So, thanks a lot.
One more question.
Over to you, reporter.
Either earlier in this panel or the prior panel, somebody mentioned blockchain is pretty exciting when it comes to missing for a while. But this panel was more, okay, we'll learn that blockchain probably shook their heads yes on agreements with that. But it makes me think of Michael's last question, which is how would finance departments feel about payments in cryptocurrency? So that question balanced against the invisible kind of ideal state. How do we reconcile that divide?
I'm just going to say, I think it's going to be the word revolution, evolution has been said multiple times today, and I really feel this is an evolution of steps. Marketing typically drags finance and accounting along with us, and I say us like I'm still on the agency side, but I spent a lot of time there, so that's typically, as you know, agency side, that's typically what happens. I think we will have some successes and wins and show, look what finance is going to love it. We're like, here, we're reclaiming media dollars. Look what we just reclaimed, and we're able to reinvest them. Look at the performance that's improved, and look at ROI has gone up. And, ultimately, the performance of the agency should go up because they're, getting more money from their clients, especially if they're performance-based. So I think it's an evolution to that point, not a revolution. Right now they'd probably start, if they really knew what we were up to, they'd be like, oh, stop that meeting. We need to slow this down. I need to explore this. Who's looking at that? It would cause a whole bunch of pushback probably.
I think it's an excellent question. I think we collectively believe that in solving the reconciliation problem, the next step past that would be expediting payments. If we all know what we're owed, and we all agree on who's owed what, then we don't have to wait so long to figure out that exact thing. Now, the next piece of this, of course, is with a cryptocurrency, are we willing to all accept that as a value exchange? And if it's a stable coin tied to the dollar, cool, I don't think we have this problem. If it's something that fluctuates against the dollar and we have currency exchange risk, I'm not sure I ever see that happening. That's a long shot.
And doesn't that make more fun?
Oh, maybe it makes more fun. I'm not sure any CFO is going to agree with you, but we can.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking back to a meeting with a CFO we had recently. I think a member from that agency team is here. And we spoke about all the benefits in terms of budget efficiency and operational efficiency. It was just kind of nodding her head. And then we said, hey, you click 2 buttons and you have an instant audit. And she's like, wow, really? You can audit this whole thing? Because apparently it takes them 4 or 5 hours to audit anything. And that's just like, for one publisher, it takes them forever to pull it out. Some of the software is pretty antiquated. So for them, what gets them excited is they can come in at like 10:30 and not at 9 or 8:30. So I would say that's kind of a big driver.
I would like to say that I totally agree with what you said, but my dream is that it becomes kind of independent. I call it a Wikipedia of all of the reconciliations. I mean, when everyone can come to a single place and through a pre-negotiated protocol can pull out the report where everyone knows what's going on, that would be a perfect state of things.
That's pretty cool. Just one last observation back to the original question. I finished my finance MBA in 2015, and since then, the program that I went through has added 2 classes on blockchain and cryptocurrency in the last 3-4 years. So, like, also the people that are going to be the CFOs in the future are going to have some familiarity with this as well. So they're not as stagnant as we think they are, and they do like when things do mathematically just check out at the push of a button, because often for them it doesn't. Okay, Shelly?
Yep, thank you.